Every year, the people of Ashmir turned Halloween into a celebration of safety. Porch lights glowing warm against the cold, caramel apples, and costumed children racing through the cul-de-sac like flocks of small ghosts. It wasn't the kind of town anyone associated with tragedy. In fact, that was part of its charm. Nothing bad ever happened in Ashmir. At least, that's what everyone believed before that night. The last Halloween before the Burrows house incident began like any other. Parents set out folding tables with snacks, teenagers played loud music from their cars, and the smell of roasted corn and burning leaves drifted through the crisp air. The wind carried laughter down the street, blending with the faint hum of porch lights and the rustle of paper decorations. But beneath it all, there was a tension that no one could quite name, like static before a storm. Some said later they'd felt it, that prickling unease you get when you're being watched. Others dismissed it as nerves, as the usual thrill of the season. The Burrows house sat at the end of the street, just beyond where the asphalt gave way to gravel. Its windows were dark, its paint peeling, the porch sagging under years of neglect. Kids told stories about it, of course, that Mrs. Burrows' shadow still moved through the windows, that the house breathed on cold nights. No one took it seriously. It was a ghost story, the kind every town had. Until Jacob Reed suggested they play hide and seek there. Jacob was 17, cocky and restless, the kind of boy who made everything a dare. "It's Halloween," he'd said, grinning through fake vampire teeth. "What's the point if we don't scare ourselves a little?" 6 of them went. Jacob, his girlfriend Lila, her cousin Evan, Tara, Miles, and Jenna, all friends since middle school. They told the others they were heading to the park for one last game before curfew. No one questioned it. At 9:42 p.m., they were seen crossing toward the end of Ashmere Lane, flashlights in hand, laughter echoing faintly behind them. A few adults heard them shouting jokes as they ran. The next time anyone mentioned those names together was in a police report. No one remembers hearing them come back. The Burrows house had been locked up since Mrs. Burrows' death 3 years earlier. She'd been found in her parlor chair, the TV flickering in front of her, the volume turned all the way up. Some said she'd been dead for days before anyone noticed. Her son, Alan Burrows, inherited the property but rarely appeared. He was a quiet man, too quiet, some neighbors said, and there were rumors that he'd moved out of state after his mother's passing. Others whispered that he still came back sometimes. At 10:15 that night, Carol Denton, who lived directly across the street, went outside to bring in her pumpkins before the fog rolled in. She said she saw movement inside the Burrows house, a faint flash of light near the second-floor window. At first, she assumed it was kids with flashlights. Then she saw a shape. Tall. Not holding a light. "I thought it was a mannequin," she told police later. But then it turned its head. When she blinked, it was gone. Inside the Burrows house, the 6 teens were arguing about rules. Jacob wanted to be the seeker first. Lila thought the place was too big and too dark. The others were torn between fear and excitement. The air inside smelled of dust and old wallpaper. Each step they took echoed faintly, like someone following just out of sight. Evan swore he heard a whisper behind him, a soft, drawn-out hiss that faded when he turned. Tara laughed it off. "Probably the wind," she said. But the windows were shut tight. At 9:57 p.m., they started the first round. Lila stayed behind with Jacob, counting to 30 while the others scattered through the house. She could hear their footsteps fading through the hallways, up the stairs, the faint creak of old floorboards stretching under their weight. When she opened her eyes, the flashlight beam shook slightly in her hand. "Ready or not?" she called, forcing a smile. "Here we come." Jacob's voice echoed from somewhere near the kitchen. "Check upstairs. I'll go down." She climbed the staircase, her light sweeping over walls marked with peeling wallpaper and faint scratches, long, uneven, like something dragged nails across the paint. Each door she passed stood slightly ajar. "Evan," she called. "Tara? You guys hiding up here?" No answer. Something shifted in the hallway above her, a faint thump like someone moving a piece of furniture. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. The sound came again, heavier this time. Then silence. She turned toward the end of the hallway where the last door stood half open. The faint smell of rot drifted through the crack. Jacob. When she pushed the door, it didn't move easily. Something on the other side was blocking it. She pushed harder, it gave a little, scraping against the floor. And that's when something on the other side pushed back. Lila stumbled away, the flashlight flickering. Her scream echoed through the empty rooms, and somewhere below, Jacob shouted her name. By the time he reached the stairs, she was gone. Outside, a few neighbors later reported hearing screaming around that time, high, short bursts of sound, muffled as if from inside a house. Carol Denton almost called the police then but decided against it. "It's Halloween," she said. "Probably kids with a prank." At 10:47 p.m. she finally made the call, after seeing that same tall figure in the window again. When officers arrived, the house was dark and silent. They knocked, called out, waited. Eventually they pried open the back door, the same one Jacob had supposedly loosened earlier that week. Inside they found 4 flashlights scattered across the floor near the staircase. One of them was still on, beam pointed toward the ceiling. There were footprints everywhere, too many for 6 people. Some of them didn't match the others. They were larger. Bare. No one could explain the smell that hung in the air, not quite rot, not quite mold, but something old, like the inside of a closed coffin. When they reached the second floor, they found Lila's phone lying in the hallway, camera open, recording. The last video lasted 11 seconds. It showed the door at the end of the hall slowly swinging open, and something tall and gray moving behind it, limbs bending wrong, face obscured by shadow. Then the camera fell. And the recording ended with the sound of breathing, not human, deep and rasping, like something exhaling after a long, hungry wait. When police entered the Burrows house that Halloween night, they expected to find a prank gone wrong. A handful of teenagers hiding in closets, maybe trying to spook their neighbors. Instead, they walked into something that felt wrong the moment they crossed the threshold. The air was cold, unnaturally cold, despite the heating system being long dead. Their breath fogged under their flashlights. The wallpaper seemed to pulse in and out of shadow as the beams moved across it. At 11:12 p.m., Officer Grant Lowell radioed in, requesting backup and confirming possible missing persons. By midnight, the entire street was blocked off. Blue and red lights flickered across the carved pumpkins, their painted grins now warped and trembling in the wind. Neighbors gathered behind the tape, whispering. Some said they saw faces in the upstairs windows. Others swore they heard knocking from inside the house. Rhythmic, steady, like something alive was trying to get out. Recorded interview, Officer Grant Lowell, excerpt. Taken November 3, 2019, 3 days after the incident. "When we went in, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Not rot, not exactly, more like old blood and dust. It got stronger the closer we got to the stairs. We found the flashlights in a pile like someone had set them there on purpose. We called out the kids' names, did a sweep. Nothing. But there were sounds, upstairs mostly. Not footsteps. More like dragging. You'd turn a corner and it'd stop. The kind of silence that makes your stomach twist. When dawn broke, 5 of the 6 teenagers were listed as missing. The 6th, Miles Cooper, was found wandering behind the Burrows property at 5:43 a.m. He was barefoot, shivering, his face streaked with dust. He couldn't speak for nearly 2 days. When he finally did, his words made little sense. "It wasn't a person," he said. "It wasn't supposed to see us." For weeks, Ashmir lived under a kind of suspended terror. The Burrows house was sealed, guarded, examined. Nothing conclusive ever made it to the public. But leaks from inside the department suggested that more was found, far more than officials admitted. A crime scene technician later claimed they found handprints in the walls, deep impressions elongated as though someone had pressed their hands into wet plaster decades ago. Others said a crawl space was discovered behind the parlor, filled with old photographs. Most were too faded to identify, but one, dated October 31, 1986, showed a group of children playing in the same living room. Their faces were blurred, smeared except for one, a boy standing in the corner, eyes blacked out with ink. When the photo was shown to Alan Burrows, the deceased homeowner's son, he reportedly turned pale. "That wasn't one of the neighborhood kids," he said quietly. "That was my mother's friend. He died before I was born." Transcript. Miles Cooper, Psychological Evaluation. November 14, 2019. Dr. Keener, "Miles, can you tell me again what happened when you went upstairs?" Miles, "It was dark. We were hiding. Lila went up. We heard her scream. Then Jacob told us to stay put. But it was moving, doctor. It moved like smoke." Dr. Keener, "What was it?" Miles, pause, "It didn't have a face." Dr. Keener, "And then?" Miles, "It counted." Dr. Keener, "Counted?" Miles, "Like we did. 1, 2, 3, but slow. It sounded like it was learning. Like it was trying to remember how." The house was finally condemned in early December. Before demolition began, a final forensic sweep was conducted. During this, investigators found a trapdoor under the stairs, hidden beneath warped wood and carpet. What lay below the house had never been on record. A narrow passage led to a low room lined with old mirrors, all of them cracked. On the concrete floor were dozens of footprints, pressed into dust, large, uneven, overlapping. In the center of the room stood a single wooden chair. The surface of the seat was covered with deep scratches, 5 at a time, dragged inward as though something had clawed its way up. One of the mirrors still reflected clearly despite the cracks. In it, a faint silhouette was visible, not of the officer standing there but of something behind them, too tall for the space, head bent low. The footage cut to static 21 seconds later. After that night, the Burrows property was razed, the ground salted and fenced off. But locals said it didn't help. 4 months, residents of Ashmir claimed to hear counting in their homes late at night. A slow, deliberate whisper, sometimes near their children's rooms, sometimes right outside their windows. No trace of the missing 5 was ever recovered. Excerpt from local news broadcast, Ashmir Evening Report, October 31, 2020. It's been 1 year since the tragic disappearance of 5 local teenagers during what police have officially classified as a Halloween night accident. The Burrows lot remains vacant, though several neighbors claim to have seen strange lights on the property in recent weeks. One anonymous caller to our station stated, quote, "They were playing hide-and-seek that night. But whatever they woke up never stopped playing." In the years since, Ashmir never held another Halloween block party. The decorations were boxed away, the laughter gone from the cul-de-sac. But every October, without fail, someone leaves a flashlight at the edge of the vacant lot. Batteries drained, switch turned on. And if you walk past just after midnight, some swear you can still hear it. 1, 2, 3. Ready or not. The shadows never truly fade, they only wait for the next story. If this tale sent a chill down your spine, then you've just tasted the dread that drips within these walls. Subscribe to Dew of Dread, where every story whispers a truth that should have stayed buried. Turn on your notifications, so when the next horror unfolds, you'll be the first to hear it breathe. Until then, keep your lights low and your doors locked. This is Dew of Dread, where nightmares are told like truth.